Hey everyone, this is your host Steve with the Pixel Meditations. Welcome to episode 39. This is kind of a strange episode for us because it is the last episode of 2019, but it's also an episode that we don't have one continuous theme, which is very different from past episodes. So in this episode, we talk about the gist of our lives. We give you a very quick run through of what our lives were like in the 2010s, like graduating university, moving to a different country and having a job, entering the job market. Then we roll into a continuation of the last episode where we talked about nature. So we talk about some of our favorite trips in the last 10 years and more about nature and kind of what the value of nature is. Then we go back into video games and we talk about our favorite games of every year and the transfer from the 7th generation to the 8th generation and why we much prefer the 8th generation. And the episode ends with a very fast discussion on podcasts, what podcasts kind of mean and what podcasts we recommend and which ones we listen to. It's a bit of a strange episode in terms of all our past content, so I think this is going to be a bit of an outlier. Nevertheless, we hope you enjoy it, and there's some really cool bits here. And it's given us a lot of cool ideas for future podcasts based on a lot of the information we couldn't cram into this episode, because a lot of the problems with this episode came from just trying to put way too much into the episode. We originally wanted to add in a philosophy and a media section on movies and TV shows, but we decided, probably for the better, that these would be better incorporated in a future episode where we have more time. So with that, I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll catch you guys in 2020. Cheers. Hey everyone, welcome to the final Pixel Meditations episode of 2019 and the 2010 decade. As a sort of tribute to the decade, we're going to make a mini 2010s episode based upon a couple of our favorite topics. So Toby, are you ready for this?
Yeah, man, it's going to be pretty interesting. I think maybe we got a little ambitious here, but I think this will be a really fun episode for our listeners. It's like you said, it's the end of the decade, and I think a lot of really significant things happened this decade, and all of the kind of realms that we're interested in and focused on in our lives. And yeah, we just kind of want to summarize things and make some interesting conclusions here.
Yeah, so for us, this was the decade we both graduated college. It's the episode we went to the workforce. It's an episode where we lived in a different country. And it's the episode that comprised most of our 20s. So this is a pretty huge decade for us. And we sort of wanted to start off, not getting too far into the rabbit hole, but talking about our personal experiences in the decade and sort of what it means to us. So Toby, let's start off with finishing undergrad, because you're in graduate school right now. But what left an impression on you about finishing college in the 2010s?
So I graduated from university in 2012, and I can definitely remember the distinct thought of, okay, what the hell do I do now?
Yeah.
Because I think we're, as a society, we're kind of out of this kind of phase where a clear career is guaranteed to you based on a certain degree. I mean, some people are lucky enough to have that, but for most of us, it's kind of like this transition and jumping between jobs and kind of just like hoping that you find something that kind of sticks and works for you in the long run. So for me, the early 2010s were kind of me jumping around and kind of trying out different things, and several things didn't work, but eventually I got on a good course, but it took a hell of a long time.
Yeah, I think actually I had a bit of a different experience when I graduated university, because I finished university and I pretty much had it in my head at that point that I wanted to go abroad. So I was pretty much just like, I'm going to do this teaching thing. But there was like a summer where I was playing music with a couple guys, and we were kind of started our own bands. And my guitarist was a little bit crazy, got into a lot of drugs and stuff. And I had to kind of choose. I was at this kind of fork in the road where I was playing our music, and I was like, man, I really love these songs. And the dreamer inside of me was like, I should totally see if this is going to work. There's a guy that's offering to get us into a recording studio. And the other flip side of it was like teach abroad. I was like, man, I've always wanted to travel. I don't want to be one of those people that's like never left the country. And so ultimately what happened was I kind of just like after the band kind of fell apart naturally, I was just like, well, I'm definitely going to go abroad. Like I was applying for a few other jobs, but I was pretty much like, get me on the first ticket to Korea out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, Korea kind of came into place, sort of out of, I guess a dead end of one of my paths. And it was kind of like an escape. Like I really just wanted a massive change in my life, just because I didn't enjoy the path that I was going down. And it's just like Korea, I think, for many people is an opportunity to kind of just shift the path that you're going. And then, you have like it's like almost like a transitionary period. And that's kind of what it was for me. So, but yeah, that's a really cool that you had the thought of going abroad right in the end of undergraduate, because for me, that was like never an idea I ever had until, life sort of took me there on it, like, in a different route. So I think that's really cool that you had that notion like really early on.
Yeah, I'm actually having trouble remembering how exactly that opportunity like jumped in my head, but yeah, it was something I had kind of planned for a good couple of years before I actually did it, as I was just kind of finishing up school. But yeah, Korea was pretty interesting. I think for a lot of people, not just Korea, like other countries too, it could be very well like Japan or China or Taiwan or even Vietnam nowadays. It's a place where you can go, you can save money, you can try a different career path, you get to live in a different country. There's a lot of like benefits you get that go beyond what people think of in the States. I have friends in the States that were making a lot more money than I was in teaching, but at the same time, like with the cost of living, not having to pay much for an apartment if you pay anything, and having like a pension saved up, like you made out usually you made out better than a lot of your friends who graduated and stayed in the States.
Yeah, well, I can certainly attest to that. I mean, I think after my first year in Korea, I got really disciplined and saved, a lot of money, and I've completely funded my graduate studies here in Germany. So, I mean, I think that's a really awesome success story. And I hope that it encourages anybody, wanting to make a big transition in their lives and, do something that's a little bit outside of the ordinary that not many people do. So, yeah.
Right. And I mean, I know that both of us have expressed some negative sentiments towards the ESL world, but you do generally work less hours. You make pretty good money. And it's definitely a job. I wouldn't say it's a boring job. It's definitely an engaging job that's probably going to beat working in office for a lot of people. So if it's something that you're thinking about doing, get at least like research it and talk to some people that have done it. And you can even do it in your 30s. I know people who have come to Taiwan when they were 34, 35. Our friend Jonathan went to Japan when he was 34. So people definitely go in their 20s, they go in their 30s, and most people have a positive experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely a little bit mixed, but I mean, what in life isn't a little bit mixed? And I think the greatest part about the whole ESL experience is you really get to have a unique experience that, is just very uncommon for people usually from your home country. And it really just opens you up and makes you think about, different cultures and different parts of the world in ways that you never really imagined. I mean, we could honestly make the whole episode about this. I mean, that's
Yeah.
but it's a huge topic. But like, I think it's just kind of important because it's something that, we both share and that we did share this decade. So, yeah. So I think it's good to just kind of talk about that experience. It's really a cool shared experience that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've went to graduate school since then, and I'm still abroad, but I'm not teaching at this point. So I'm working in an office position, a startup company, and I'm doing some audio recording. I'm writing some blogs. I'm doing a lot of editing work. So both of us have sort of snaked our way outside of ESL, and that is definitely possible, but it might not seem like that sometimes when you're in a different country. But the last thing I want to talk about here, because I think it's really cool, is the fact that when you live abroad, you get to travel a lot more. If you're from North America, it can be really hard to leave the country.
Yeah, no, that's actually absolutely true. Especially when you live in a country like South Korea, which is basically like an island in and of itself. It's cut off from all the rest of Asia by North Korea, so it's basically an island. Yeah, you're always going to be traveling there, like to Japan, to Taiwan, to the Philippines, or wherever else you want to go. Like, there's so many travel opportunities, and yeah, like you end up like truly taking international travel for granted because it's just like what you do. Whereas people in the States, I think, are a little bit more constrained financially and also just geographically. It's like extremely difficult to like get yourself to Asia or Europe or something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're in Europe now, so I mean, you can literally now take trains and go to different countries.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, and I have done that, and it's pretty great. Um, I mean, it's a little bit more expensive than it is in Asia, especially here in Germany. The trains are not cheap, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to see cool places. So,
All right. Well, that's kind of like our basic story. That's like a very, very basic version
oh
of
yeah,
our
yeah,
decade.
yeah, for sure,
But
for
that
sure.
kind of gives us a good transition. So the first like major topic we're going to talk about here is going to be nature. And I think, like I said, we're talking about the 2010s. So, Toby, for you, I mean, did you have any new experiences with nature, or did you have any changes in your sort of mentality or belief system, or the way that you went about interacting or thinking about nature?
I think for me, I spent a lot more time in this decade doing, I guess you would say, solo trips or just trips with me or maybe like one or two other people. I think that was the primary way that I experienced nature. And I think previously it was always with much larger groups, either like my university classes or I was in the scouts or just various like large groups. But this decade, I really took the opportunity to kind of try to do the hiking and nature experiences on my own. And that's been really cool because you really get a lot of agency and you can decide exactly what you want to do and how you want to do it. But yeah, of course, like we did a lot of hiking together in Korea, which was really cool. It was really awesome to see how Koreans do hiking. I don't necessarily like it 100%, like the old guys with their loud music. But I mean, there are some really cool aspects to nature in Korea, like hiking in Korea, that I didn't expect. Like the all those temples in the mountains in Korea, like I never expected that. That was really awesome.
Yeah, you mean you never started wearing your hiking clothes when you went to the grocery store to pick up your fruit,
No.
fully decked out with your trekking poles?
Just on like the off day. Yeah, no, I never did that.
No, I never did either. It's a joke, but yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that I took nature a little bit for granted growing up, just because it literally surrounded me, being from Maine. But moving to Korea, I had this really great spot. I mean, we lived in the same street, so I mean, we literally lived on the same street.
Yeah, in Korea, we both lived on the same street.
We had this really cool spot that's sort of on the outskirts of a big city, a city of like 2 million people. And behind our apartments was a trail that led to the mountains, this really mountainous, cool area with this Buddhist school and some like jjimjilbangs, are basically bathhouses. And then if you went the other way, you basically went into like a giant city square and could like take the MRT or train into the city center. So it was sort of like a best of both worlds situation. So I really found Korea to be a great time to like enjoy big city life, but also just basically escape into nature whenever I wanted to, which is something I've never experienced because I never lived in a big city before I lived in Korea. And I still felt like I kept the nature side of my life pretty intact there, but adding the big city was actually a lot of fun for a couple years. I don't know how you did you ever live in any big cities before Korea?
Yes, I lived in San Diego, which was definitely a much worse experience. Americans really love San Diego. It's like they're just the ocean and the great weather and et cetera, et cetera. I just found the especially the highway system in California to be really obnoxious. It's so crowded. It's just like nuts. Of course, Asian cities are really bad in a sense because the population density is just absolutely insane. It's like the highest in the world pretty much. But they don't have these like concrete highway hells that Southern California has, where you just like you're stuck in traffic for way longer than you you think is reasonable in all directions. And also just the cost of living in California is so insane. I really didn't enjoy that aspect. I felt like I was paying an ocean tax, to live near the ocean. Even though I rarely went to the ocean, I still had to pay the tax. But I mean, I really enjoyed Korea for the transportation, like the subway. And yeah, like you said, the area that we lived in our city was pretty much perfect because we were so close to nature. You could really easily go out there and be quite a ways from the major place where all the people live. So that was really cool. Yeah, it was a really, really fortunate, lucky place to live because a lot of people in Korea end up living in kind of like urban hells without any real
Yeah,
nature around them.
especially if you're in Seoul.
Yeah, especially if you're in Seoul. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think that was huge for me. And I guess to cap this story off, I guess the move to Taiwan sort of got me into hiking bigger mountains because the east coast of the USA doesn't really have any giant mountains. I think Mount Washington is the tallest, and that sits around 2,000 meters or 6,500 feet or so.
Uh
And
huh.
Korea's highest mountain is on Jeju Island, and that's about the same size as Washington. So when I got to Taiwan, Taiwan actually has the highest density of alpine mountains in the entire world, which is interesting.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's definitely. I mean, I didn't know that exact fact, but I mean, it's not surprising to me. I mean, Taiwan is super mountainous, especially the eastern part and the central part of Taiwan.
The mountains essentially run down the entire spine of the island.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, there's tons of mountains here that are over 3,000 meters, and there's even like a top 100 mountains, which are like all basically above 3,000 meters except for one. And they're like the most beautiful, the most iconic, the most challenging, the most technical mountains in the country. Some people like to take the challenge. One of my friends is about to finish climbing all the top 100 mountains, which is insanely hard because some of these hikes take like 7 to 10 days. And so, hiking some of the top 100 and getting to hike some of the taller mountains and getting more rugged hikes in there, like these like 2 or 3 4 day trips where you're just like in the mountains and you're hiking for like 6 to 12 hours a day. Like it can be pretty brutal, but like there's something really beautiful about that experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. Does Taiwan have kind of like a really developed hiking culture around this, just because they have so many mountains?
They do, I mean, like they're called like Baiye in Chinese. Like the top 100 are not for everybody. Like there's a lot of like hikers that don't really do those because maybe they think that they're too difficult or they're kind of hard to access. But the hiking culture in Taiwan is huge. I mean, I'd say like pretty much the same as Korea, where like there's hiking everywhere. Like all around Taipei, there's hikes. No matter where you go on this island, there's some kind of hiking to do. And the Taiwanese seem to really enjoy hiking and they really like to go up there. One thing I know that they like to do is they like to go on these mountains and they like to bring really, really like gourmet dinners. Like they love to bring a bunch of hot pot and just cook like all these vegetables and meat up there. While like us Westerners, we're sitting there scooping up our like instant noodles and like instant coffee.
Yeah. Oh man, no, that's one thing about Korea is I really really love the post hike meals that they have. Like kind of like famously pajun, which is like green onion pancakes kind of, and also makgeolli, which is like a fermented like rice wine, which is nothing like sake, but I guess it's of a similar sort, but not doesn't taste anything like sake. But yeah, I mean, I really really love that whole aspect of Asian hiking, like the different like meals and stuff that you have that are really commonly associated with it. It's so cool.
Yeah, and also I guess we have to point out real quick here that like the hiking community in Asia is just like so friendly. Every single person you pass is gonna basically tell you hello or ask you where you're from or something. Like people in Asia tend to be kind of like a bit rugged or rigid. I'd say rigid. They're a bit rigid when they're in the cities, but when they go hiking, they become completely opened up.
Yeah. No, they're super friendly. You can talk to anybody and have a really great conversation. Yeah, they're really like authentic. Yeah, just open in the mountains. I definitely experienced that in Korea. It's really cool.
Okay, well, I mean, to bring my story full circle here with nature, I would say like now I'm actually really excited to go back to the USA and do a lot more hiking and to get back into something like I really want to learn how to fly fish. I've started rock climbing a little bit, And being abroad for so long has made me really kind of appreciate what I don't have in my home country and realize just how much great stuff there is in the USA to do, especially in terms of the outdoors.
Oh yeah, no, totally. That's how I feel as well. Like now that I've lived in Asia and Europe for a long time, my appreciation for nature in North America is probably the highest it's ever been, especially out west. Places like Zion National Park or the Grand Canyon, or I don't know, just like the high desert in New Mexico. Like when you're just like in the middle of nowhere and all you see is the flat terrain and the desert around you in the sky. Like just that like kind of sense of like almost like desolation. I really miss that kind of nature where it's like you really feel like you're just in the middle of nowhere. It's like like it's really hard to get that feeling out in Europe. You can't go somewhere where it's like you look in any direction and you really don't see very much human habitation, but you can easily see that out west.
I'd imagine in Europe, maybe somewhere like the Alps or somewhere must have like when I went hiking in Romania and I was doing like a Carpathian hike, that was definitely like a pretty rugged hike. And there was definitely like endless mountains around me. I imagine there must be spots in Europe kind of like that.
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely. There definitely are. Even in Germany, there definitely is. It's just like, I think maybe it's just not the same scale. Like you can find pockets, but it's not anything like the same scale as North America by any means. Like even the Alps are they're like nothing compared to the Rockies, but I mean I think the Alps are still really amazing. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd say all these mountain ranges are really amazing. Every single mountain range I visit, I seem to really come to appreciate. But okay, I think we talked a lot about the stuff we like. But like, do you have a trip or some kind of like outdoor experience that really resonated with you in the last 10 years?
I mean, in our last podcast, we talked about a few of our experiences. I think, I think in the States, just anytime I can go to a national park is always like a really cool experience. So when I was in the States, actually I didn't, in the last episode I mentioned Zion National Park, but also I went to Bryce Canyon National Park. Have you heard of that one?
I've heard of it. Where is that one?
It's in Utah as well. It's in southern Utah. It's quite close to Zion, but it's like it has these really interesting geological formations. I believe they're called like hoodos or something like that. But they're really interesting. It's like you just feel like you're in a like a geological like cathedral or something like that. Like they're these really tall like kind of like sandstone pillars, and there's like thousands of them all around you, and they're just like really unique looking, and it's a really really cool place. I really recommend it to anybody in the area.
That sounds so awesome.
Oh yeah, no. Actually, I think as far as nature, I think Utah is really high up there. It might be my favorite in the whole world. I'm not sure, but
I'm just gonna say that's why like Utah right now is my number one state that I want to try to move to when I go back to the States. Like that's literally the number one state I'm looking at.
Utah nature is incredible. It has the extremes, like you have your desert and you have your mountains, and you have also in the north you have the Great Plains as well. So it really has the gamut of the most amazing nature in North America. Anyways, what about you? What's your best nature experience of the decade?
I don't know if I can pick a number one. I don't know if I can say like this is the best one, but yeah, it would probably have to be hiking in Taiwan. Just because I've never done this kind of hiking before, and now I've come to become kind of addicted to it. Like I said, these kind of rugged hikes where you're going to have to basically like kill yourself for 8 to 10 hours in a day, but you end up in these insanely beautiful alpine mountains with just the best views you can imagine. And I guess if I had to pick one, I would say just my trip to Snow Mountain. The Snow Mountain is Taiwan's second tallest mountain. And unless it's wintertime, there's not usually snow on Snow Mountain, though there is right now. But yeah, I've gone there twice, and it was my second really big hike in Taiwan, and I literally felt like I was going to die. I know that sounds terrible, but like the second day I woke up, and these hikes, you wake up at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning, and you're hiking for 2 or 3 hours in the dark sometimes. And to me, that's the hardest part of these hikes. I hate hiking in the dark, just staring at a headlamp. It's just miserable. You're exhausted. You're just tired, and there's just not really like a way I can express just how horrible I feel sometimes when I have these like early morning hikes. You keep hiking, and the sun just starts to peek out over the mountain. You see the colors slowly change, and as soon as the sun comes up, you feel just absolutely amazing. And you're sitting on this peak at like 6 or 7 in the morning with the sunrise, drinking a coffee and eating food, and you're just like in pure serenity. Like you just could not be in a better place appreciating this sunrise. And it just makes all that toil and hard work worth it. And Snow Mountain to me is just a great place because it has one of the best views. You can see many of the other top 100 peaks, and there's literally like North Peak, West Peak, East Peak, North Main Peak, and you can tailor your trip to be just as difficult or easy as you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that honestly, the hiking in Taiwan is really, really special. I'll always remember the Yangmingshan hike that we took, and it's just north of Taipei. Yeah, that was pretty great. It was very, very, very foggy. We could barely see, like visibility was quite low. But it was just a magical hike through the mountains. We encountered some, I guess, yak. I believe.
Yeah, mountain cows of some kind, bovine
Yeah,
species.
yeah, some kind of, I don't know, mountainous Asian bovine creature. I think it was a yak. I think it was a yak, but I'm not really sure. But it was seriously amazing. It was beautiful. It wasn't like the super longest hike, but for me it was really great. Like there were parts where we were like climbing up and down these kind of like staircases, and you just like go through these like kind of haunting like foggy forest areas that are just like brimming with like kind of like green moss on these like huge old trees. Like when we were up there, like we read that like the entire forest was like planted by the Japanese or something like that. Like this, like
Yeah.
it wasn't a native species that we were looking at. It was all stuff from that era, like the Japanese planted. And I think that's really cool that when you can like actually visibly see like history in nature, like like it's just really awesome to see something like that. Like you can see the past kind of in the forest. I think it's always really cool.
Yeah, and with Taiwan, I mean, you do see the Japanese fingerprints all over it from the Imperial Japanese period. We also went to Jingguashi and a place called Jofin, the place where kind of like supposedly Miyazaki's Spirited Away movie was inspired by. But yeah, no, Yangmingshan is just absolutely amazing because yeah, it's completely different from anywhere else in Taiwan. It's just like it's not really alpine, like it's not really tall, but it has this just like this gorgeous, endless fields of grass that don't look anything else like kind of like the almost rainforest-esque vegetation you find in the lower altitudes or like the more desolate higher altitude mountain hikes that I like to do. It's a very unique place in Taiwan, and it stands out a lot.
Yeah. It was really fascinating. I'm super glad we were able to take that hike. Yeah, I mean, I just remember at the end as well. I think we ended up catching the last transit out of there. I mean, I guess we probably could have paid somebody. It would have been expensive otherwise. But I remember we just got like really lucky with this. With this, we literally caught the last bus. I just love those experiences where it's like you feel like you get really lucky or something. Like you just feel really good. When you catch your last transit.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's so much worse if you're by yourself too. At least like we had three people together. If I was alone for that, I would have been far more kind of paranoid or like, oh fuck, what am I gonna do? I'm like stuck out here in the middle of nowhere. Like,
Yeah, no, it would have been really bad if it was, if we were not with a group. Like we were fine. Whatever, we could have done whatever. But if you're completely by yourself up there in the mountains, because even the Taiwanese, when they saw us, they're like, oh God, like the foreigners are still up here. We got to do something. And they're like running around trying to like make sure we catch our bus or whatever.
right, yeah. I mean, you're always doing like kind of like a language barrier there too. It can be very tricky. But okay, I mean that's kind of like our experiences. So I guess like to cap it off for me, like the whole decade of nature, I think for me it's sort of like it's almost like the rise at the end of like the USA. I was doing a lot of fishing, and I was like finally starting to climb some mountains. And then the fall, where I kind of like felt like I was like a little bit stuck in the city too much. And then like I guess I'm gonna call it the re-rise or kind of like the return because now it's like I just realized 100% that like I can never live my life without nature being a like kind of a central focus of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, you certainly have learned to not enjoy like the super urban areas. And I think you really, yeah, you have to be on either the edge of a city or just like living in like a more rural place. I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, and I mean I was kind of lucky because Portland, Maine is just like that kind of place where it's like there's just enough city where you're gonna feel like you're part of society, but then there's just nature in every direction. But I mean I think that for everybody, it's just a massively important part of our lives, and it's just like anything else that contributes to our overall well being and happiness. When you take it away, you just fundamentally lose something, and it's gonna negatively impact you in ways that you might not be able to completely diagnose.
Yeah, no, for sure. Um, it's just it's something, it's an aspect of life that I think people might not think a lot about, that tremendously impacts the quality of their life. Um, I think in the future we're going to be doing some more episodes about aspects like this, like things that you might take for granted, but if those things get removed or they become impaired in some significant way, then your actual quality of life really, really is impacted a lot. And I think when you don't really have a great experience or connection with nature, like your whole life is going to be much worse for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's simply because it's unnatural. Like we are naturally supposed to be somewhat connected to nature. And there's a lot of ways you can do it when you live in the city, have house plants, get to the park, go for hikes. But you can't completely artificially recreate your life without incorporating nature in there. All right, guys. Well, we're going to move on to gaming, which has arguably been the biggest part of our podcast. So we're going to go over our favorite games of each year, not taking too long, and some extra stuff that happened in the decade. So, Toby, let's just start with some of the stuff that happened. So, in the beginning of the decade, it was the end of the seventh generation of gaming. And that was kind of a huge point in gaming for both of us, I think, and especially the rise of the eighth generation, somewhat the current generation minus maybe the Switch. So let's talk about the end of the seventh generation first. What were you kind of thinking about gaming or doing at the end of the last generation with the PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii, the regular Wii, and the DS?
Yeah, so I kind of, in the seventh generation of gaming, I kind of fell off of gaming, because this was during I guess my university years, and for some reason I just got out of console gaming altogether. Like I was much more of like a PC gamer in college. Um, but I mean, I had a Wii, and later I got a PS3. So yeah, I mean, I think I just didn't play that many console games during that era. I did enjoy a bunch of Wii games. Like I think we're gonna talk about it later, but we both enjoyed Skyward Sword for sure for the Wii. That was a really great game. Uh-huh. But in general, I think the heyday of my gaming experience was probably the fifth and sixth generations. So I would say like N64 and followed by GameCube. That was like kind of like the biggest time for my gaming life. And then the seventh generation kind of started a decline in my gaming interest. And then I think the beginning of the eighth generation with the PS4, I really didn't get into that until much later. And then only recently now have I become more interested in it. So I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, actually, I wasn't an early adopter, but I had a Wii before I had a PS3. And when I first got my Wii, I had a lot of fun with it. Was playing stuff like Super Smash Bros. Melee. All right, sorry, Brawl. I had Zelda, Twilight Princess, Mario Galaxy. I can't think of names right now. And I did have some fun with it, but it felt like the Wii had sort of expired before its actual death in terms of my interest with it. I just found the controls to be a little bit gimmicky and the games to be very limited. Like after you finished the core Nintendo games, there wasn't much else. I got my PS3 in 2009, actually, and my problem with the seventh generation with the consoles was largely that the kind of games I really grew up loving were not represented. I was really into platformers and RPGs, and the seventh generation to me was a time when it was all about action games and the rise of indie games. And while there were some like really good action games I loved, like the Batman Arkham games and Uncharted, I just felt a little bit out of place, and I was a little bit worried in that generation that gaming was just sort of slipping away and turning into something that I didn't really recognize.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I felt something kind of similar because, especially in the N64 era, I was really into 3D platforming games, and I think there was a huge decline in 3D platforming generally up until very recently with the release of a few really great 3D platformers. But that's been a very like underrepresented genre generally speaking. So yeah, no, I definitely felt like gaming was kind of leaving me, especially in the console world, because I think both of us are not like huge into these really big like FPS games, first person shooter games, or like sports games, or like racing games, or like anything like that. Like it's really not our cup of
It
tea.
depends on what it is, I guess. I mean, there are some first person shooters we both absolutely love, like Bioshock and Half-Life 2 and GoldenEye and stuff. But yeah, we're not going to be playing, we're not the kind of people that are going to be playing the newest Gran Turismo and Call of Duty and Battlefield when they come out.
Yeah, for sure. No, I definitely agree with that.
And yeah, I guess for me to say it is I think that the PS3 really had a great last couple of years because I really had a lot of fun with a lot. They put a lot of the retro games on there. You could buy like all the PS1, PS2 games on your PS3, and so that was really amazing. I had a great collection, and we're gonna talk about this game later. But the PS3 ended with one of my favorite games of all time, and it's also the last game I played before I left for Korea, and that was The Last of Us. So I felt like the generation ended really strong, but it had overstayed its welcome. And I was really, really ready for that generation to pretty much be over when it ended, and I think a lot of people felt the same way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the Wii kind of okay, the Wii U definitely didn't help, but the Wii itself kind of left a sour taste in some people's mouths just because it was geared so much towards this like very I don't know, kind of gimmicky market. Like it didn't really seem like it was like true gaming to just like market to like, you know, 50-year-old people who buy a Wii for like one game like Wii bowling and then just like sell it or just like leave it on a shelf forever, which was kind of in vogue for like a long time in that generation, and that was really annoying. And then I think development, we've talked about this before, but the development of the PS3 was kind of like hampered by the really confusing or complicated cell technology. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we just didn't have a lot of great games. And then I think just the domination of the Xbox 360, which is, you know, not necessarily our favorite cup of tea right there for both of us.
But, you know, the PS3 didn't do as bad as you think it did. It still sold a lot, and it had a really good second half. I mean, and it climbed back into the game. What I'll say with both the Wii, though, is like, yeah, it's not just the marketing, but it's also the fact that, like, after you play the Wii for a few months, you realize just how limited those nunchucks were. Like, there was just, like, they were very one-dimensional motion control, and they did a really good job with the Motion Plus. Did you have the Wii Motion Plus remotes?
Yeah, I did get that eventually, especially for Skyward Sword. I think it was required for that game.
And those are really amazing. If the Wii had started off with something like that, I think it would have been a little bit of a different ball game. And if they had something like the Pro Controller that the Switch has, that the Wii could have been a lot different. Now, obviously, we're putting a little bit too much pressure on a console that, you know, couldn't have had all this technology back then, or likely wouldn't have. But yeah, so I think with that, let's go through our first few picks, because 2010 to 2013 is that generation. So we put our favorite games for 2010, and I wrote down a DS game, actually, Pokemon Soul Silver. Did you get a chance to play these, the remakes?
I did not, but that's really cool. I mean, I loved Pokemon Silver. It's probably my favorite Pokemon game of all time. I kind of fell off the Pokemon bandwagon, and I haven't gotten on since Silver and Gold, which is kind of crazy because that was a long time ago.
Well, I was pretty much in the same boat, and that's exactly why I grabbed Soul Silver, because I was like, what? This is like a remake of Silver? That's awesome. That was like literally like my favorite Pokemon game ever, as much as I played Red and Blue. So I didn't get into Pokemon Soul Silver necessarily as much as I got into the old ones. Like, I don't even know if I actually finished it, but I really just loved like getting back into that world, seeing it look a lot more beautiful and colorful. and having it on a modern console. And I actually still own this game. It's actually one of the very few like original DS games that I still own, and it's sitting right in my bedroom right now in Taiwan. So I love this game and the remake, and they just did a really good job bringing back pretty much the best Pokemon.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a great classic. It's a really wonderful game. So okay, so for my best game of 2010, so did you ever play Super Mario Galaxy 2?
Yes, I love it actually. It's a really good game.
Yeah, yeah. I talked about the decline of 3D platforming games, which is I think true. Maybe it's just a hard genre to do well. I'm not really sure, but Nintendo just does it very, very well. Like the Super Mario Galaxy games, both of them are just damn amazing. Obviously Mario Odyssey that just came out is amazing. So yeah, I can't speak more highly enough. Yeah.
Nintendo usually does Mario really well, but I think that Galaxy 2 is a bright spot in the series.
Yeah, truly. Yeah, no, it really is a great game. I mean, I think there's some aspects that I enjoy more than Mario Odyssey, I think. I think maybe just because it was a very pure experience and the worlds and just like how it felt like they really captured like the 3D platforming world in a lot of cases is like a sphere that you're kind of like running around. Like certain aspects like that I thought were done really well. Mario Odyssey tries to be really epic and kind of combine everything. Like it even has like retro aspects to it, which is really cool. I love Odyssey, but it's like it just tries to be everything.
But I think it does everything really well. It succeeds somehow. It somehow succeeds.
Yeah, it does somehow succeed. It's just like it's not. It's just I don't know. It's everything.
But I think for 3D Marios, except for like the massive Mario 64 fanboys, I know you're out there. I think like most people will say the best 3D Mario game is between Galaxy 2 and Odyssey.
Yeah, I would say so. I would agree as well. I mean, I can make an argument for either game being the best, but I certainly love both of them. So whatever.
Well, I see you cheated this year. You did we both had one cheat year where we picked two games, and I see you picked a second game here. So, what is your second game you picked?
So my second game for 2010 is StarCraft 2. So when that game came out, I was really obsessed with it. I played the heck out of it. It was a very big game during that year, and maybe for the next I don't know 2 to 3 years after that. If you were a PC gamer, yeah, you were playing that game, and I think that game did a lot for the online community as well. Like it really got competitive gaming, to a level that had never reached before. It's since been superseded by things like League of Legends, which I really despise and I can't stand. But
yeah.
But I mean, just like I think it's really cool when video games can really interact with like a competitive scene or just like community. And I think it really took gaming to a level that really had never been to before as far as that goes. And I think that's really cool. It's kind of a very rare thing to see a game like reach that kind of stratospheric level. So I would be completely remiss if I did not put StarCraft 2 on my list. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. And it fits the fact that we were talking about Korea so much in the first part of this episode because there's no game that exemplifies Korea more than StarCraft.
That's true.
I mean, I'm not a huge StarCraft fan, mostly because I'm just really, really terrible at it, and I didn't really get to play it that much. But I respect it, and I think it's a really cool game, and I like the strategy aspect of it. It's just the fact that it moves so fast. I feel like as soon as I'm trying to like wrap my brain around what I'm doing, someone's already just killing me.
Yeah. No, I mean it is really difficult. I mean it's. Yeah, I mean, it's like chess, but like someone like playing chess with someone like pointing a gun at your head. Like it's just like when you have that level of stress of your actual motions and actions added on top of it, it just makes the game 1,000 times harder. It is.
But I think that's probably part of the addiction too, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, it absolutely is. I think it takes just the whole like experience of a video game and how demanding it can be to the next level.
All right, so overall, I'm going to say 2010 was a pretty good year to start off the decade.
I would say so, yeah.
Based just upon our picks here.
I would say so.
2011. I'm really surprised that you didn't pick the game I picked, but now I see why. So my pick is Zelda Skyward Sword. Basically, any year there's a Zelda game, you pretty much can guarantee that's going to be my pick. And Skyward Sword is actually one of my favorite Zelda games. It's probably in my top 5. I think it is. I feel like that list probably changes a lot. But I love the way the motion controls work. The Wii Motion Control Plus Wiimotes worked really well in Skyward Sword, the way I really wanted them to work. You could slice enemies, you could jab at them. The only complaint I had with this game was just that it was a little bit too long. It felt like it was a little bit redundant by the end of the game. But the world was just so beautiful. I loved the sky world, flying around the clouds, being on the floating islands up there.
Mm-hmm.
The music was beautiful. The graphics were beautiful. I really appreciated the cel shading look a little bit more than I liked Twilight Princess's realistic look. So for me, this game was just really magical. And I remember this game being really important for me as a gamer because this sort of reminded me how beautiful games were. I was like, wow, this is exactly how I felt as a kid when I played games. I just felt like I was being transported into a new world.
Yeah, no, it was definitely magical. I wasn't as big a fan of the kind of the cloud aspect of it. I thought the music was a little bit over the top and hyper epic.
See, I loved it, but yeah, I'm all into that.
But I will give it the motion controls, and it probably had the best dungeons of any modern 3D Zelda game. So maybe.
Okay, well, your pick I think is one of your favorite games of all time. So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I picked Portal 2. So I think as you can tell by my picks, I kind of got into PC gaming a little bit during this time. But Portal 2 is just a fantastic game. It's really unlike any other game ever. Just the fact that it has these crazy puzzles with this, I don't know, just really strange portal technology, and then just the way that it uses it and the way that it uses physics. It's completely unique and really interesting. And I can't even explain this game really adequately. I think you really have to play it to really understand. But it's just it's such a cool game because it shows you kind of the potential of gaming to reach new levels and to show you new things and give you new experiences that you never really had before. That aspect is really cool. And it's just it's the perfect game for Valve to release. And it really symbolizes Valve very well. They really kind of only want to release games, it seems like, if they can push the limits and do things that have never really been done before, like these crazy puzzles with these interesting portals, and take the whole gaming industry to the next level. If they can't do that, then I think they just don't release games. Anyways.
Yeah, probably. But I appreciate that strategy. It seems but Valve also seems like they really like to play with physics. That's an obsession of theirs, is they kind of like to see what they can do with in-game mechanics that can give the player a really hyper-realistic, or not even hyper-realistic, but this sense of control over the character that they can't get in other games in the same genre.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about 2012? The last year, the last year of the universe.
2012, well, 2013 I think it was, but 2012 to me is the weakest year of the decade in terms of games. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but we both picked indie games, so that should tell you that this year wasn't really a huge
it really wasn't
year of lists. But I picked a really good indie game, and the game I picked is called The Unfinished Swan. Did you play this game?
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Oh, dude, It's great. Okay, in this game, it's only a 3-hour game. You can beat this in a sitting if you really want. And it's a kid's fairy tale. You're playing inside a fairy tale book. But the whole world is white, and all you have is black paint. So you just throw around black paints, and as you throw black paint around, you're going to start realizing there's features like walls and benches and castles. So you basically need to walk around and jump on stuff and keep throwing paint to bring this world to life. And you're kind of following this magical swan's footprints through this world. There's a couple later levels where it's going to change a little bit, but basically this is a game that just completely takes you. You have nothing. The whole game's just white, and you just basically have an empty canvas and you create the world around you. And I thought it was just a really, really, really unique game. And I just found it absolutely charming. And with how short it was, I just loved the whole experience. I give it a 5 out of 5. It's one of my favorite indie games of all time.
Yeah, no, I get it. That sounds really cool. I'll have to check it out. I really honestly have never heard of that one.
It's really cool, and I got it for free on my PS4 because I bought it for the PS3. So I know you can get it on the PS4 as well.
All right, nice. Well, like you said, I chose an indie game as well, and it's one I know you definitely love it as
Yeah,
well.
it's a really cool game.
But Journey I chose. I'm sure many of our listeners will know this game, but Journey is really really cool. I really had never played a game quite like it before. It really kind of like showed me what the indie scene can do. I just found it like very like kind of magical and simple and just kind of really fun. Um, like I think video games don't have to be really complicated to be worth playing. Like in Journey, you're just like a character, like a nameless character, and you're just kind of in this like kind of like desert sand world, and you're just moving along, kind of trying to get to the end of this. I don't know. I guess you could say level, but like it's just like really beautiful, and the controls are really cool, and it just feels like yeah, just like a magical experience. I can't explain it more than that, but it's a really fun game.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of like this freeform game, and you're floating around. There's like some ice parts, but yeah, overall, you really don't know what's going on, but you know that you're a part of this really beautiful natural experience, and you feel like you're in kind of the natural world, and you're flying around, and you're trying to kind of figure out what's going on, but at the same time, you don't really care about knowing all the details. You're just really enjoying the actual journey, I guess, as the title would suggest. So 2012, we both picked indie games, both very strange indie games that are very popular. And to me, that's the weakest year. But like I said, those are both incredible games. So they're not by any means bad. They're just kind of they're short and they're indie games. So they might not live up to AAA titles in some respects, such as like getting a big bang for your buck. But moving on to 2013, this is one of my favorite games of all time. I already told you, so I picked The Last of Us. I probably don't need to say much about this game. I'm sure most of you have played it. It's one of the only games that's almost made me cry. Beautiful, beautiful story. You get to walk around the world as post-apocalyptic zombie lands, and like it's just absolutely beautiful. The parts you're going through clickers are just absolutely thrilling and terrifying. And I just thought that this game push storytelling in a video game to the next level. I've never seen a story told in a game like The Last of Us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that point. It's really yeah, it's unlike, I mean, it's the most perfect experience for what it is, if that makes any sense. Like the characterization is done so well, the gameplay is really good, the plot's really good, the music's really good. It's like I don't know, like there's just nothing really bad about The Last of Us. It's just like probably the most perfect game, for what it is.
A common complaint some people say is the exploration. Some people don't like how long you walk around with doing nothing, but that didn't bother either of us, I don't think.
No, I mean, I guess you could kind of say that, but I mean, they fill that time like pretty well. Like you have some very meaningful conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the problem is that some people have a very conventional. I don't want to say conventional, but they have a very strong feeling of what a video game is. And if you're not always playing or you're just watching for too long, then that kind of breaks the boundaries of what a video game is. I know some people especially people that grew up in the arcade era. They're like, hey, if I'm going to play a game, I want to be playing. I don't want to be watching.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think during this time, you really saw the beginning of kind of like what we would call the truly like cinematic video game experience. Certainly maybe the perfection of this, just like having a video game feel much more like a movie in some ways. And I think that's kind of what The Last of Us is going for. Like it's trying to give you like a more engaged narrative experience, which I think is something that a lot of video games lack. And it's really great to see that included because you really get this like sense of characterization, and you feel like you really know Ellie or you really know Joel, and you really feel connected to their struggles. Like, oh my God, like the end of Last of Us, like I won't like go into extreme detail or anything, but the just like the power of that scene when you're in the kind of like the hospital at the end.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't played it by now, then go hop to it. But yeah, definitely. But just due to time, I would say like, we should probably move on to your pick for 2013.
Okay, so this is a 3DS game, so A Link Between Worlds, and I know you played
I
this
have.
game, and you speak highly of it as
Yeah.
well. But I think it's really cool. I think A Link to the Past for the SNES is one of my favorite games, for the Zelda games ever. So this game was much more like that. I enjoyed the like kind of like the more like 3D thing, and then like how you can go between, I don't know, the whole like 2D like melting between worlds or whatever. Like I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was just a really well done game, and it was good. It was really fun.
Yeah, I mean, it used the same map from a Link to the Past, and I like that you could kind of like go flat against surfaces, almost like a 2D way, and change between the worlds. I think that they did the worlds part really well, because in like a Link to the Past, it's like meshed in the story, but in this game, you're actually kind of fluidly meshing between the two worlds, and I thought that was a really great way to change the series. But yeah, it was just a beautiful game. Like it was return to 2D Zelda, and anyone who likes 2D Zelda is going to really love this game, I think. And if Last of Us wasn't there, this might very well be my pick as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's The Last of Us is a really really high bar. So
All right, well, move on to 2014. There's a couple years here where I kind of didn't play much games or play many games, but I picked Metal Gear Solid 5 for 2014 because I know we've talked about this game a lot, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I just think even with the weakened storyline, I just love the diversity of the ability to like control your missions, what equipment you use, what you go in with, whether you want to just like destroy everything with rocket launchers or just like hide around. And I just thought this was every single thing I've ever wanted in Metal Gear Solid in terms of the gameplay. Unfortunately, the story doesn't deliver so much, but the gameplay was just so freaking awesome.
yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I mean, the gameplay I thought is I guess for me, like I'm much more into Metal Gear Solid for the story. So the
Yeah.
fact that side of it wasn't as exciting to me really, yeah, put a damper on that game. But I mean, I don't know. It's definitely all right. Like there's aspects of that game I really love, like especially the intro and stuff. Um, and of course the graphics and the gameplay is really good. So.
All right. Well, what did you pick for 2014?
2014, I chose an indie game. So I'm kind of with you. Like I went through a period in maybe the middle of this decade where I really didn't play very many games, but I did play Shovel Knight, and I really, really was in love with Shovel Knight the first time I played it. We've talked a lot about this in the past, but it just harkens back to what made the NES era games so awesome, especially like the 3D platforming NES games.
2D platform.
Like yeah, 2D platforming games. Sorry, like like it's like Metroid, not really Metroid, like
Mega Man, I would say.
Mega Man. That's what I was thinking. Holy crap! Yeah, it's like Mega Man, but like better.
I see. I don't think it's better, but we'll have to agree to disagree on this one.
Yeah, I love it, but yeah, I mean, I guess we can agree to disagree. I just found the controls to be really fluid and the game to be really fun. Like I love how you can really customize your abilities. It's really cool.
Yeah, well, one thing I'll say about this game that's completely unrelated to the gameplay is I love the way the developers approached marketing it. Like they gave you the treasure trove, and like just in the last week or two, you just got the last installment. So if you go back in your treasure trove, you're gonna have a new game in there, which is just like so cool that they gave you all that stuff for like basically like $30. It's just you get so much gameplay there. But yeah, I know I love Shovel Knight. I think Shovel Knight's really cool. I thought it played a little bit too close to Mega Man for me personally. See, I grew up with a lot of Mega Man. I really like Mega Man. So when I say Shovel Knight's not as good as Mega Man, that's not any insult to Shovel Knight. It's just that Mega Man's awesome. And Shovel Knight's really good as well. I just found that it felt like a lot of games I had played before meshed together, and I was kind of hoping for something a little bit more new, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes a formula that's really successful and beloved, and doesn't really like make huge changes to it, but presents it in a way
Hmm.
that's very recognizable and
Yeah,
familiar.
it's a great game, and it's one of the best bangs for your buck. So if you haven't played it, definitely go check that one out. All right, moving on to 2015. I guess we have the same pick for this one, no?
Yeah, we do.
All right. So, I mean, this is kind of a no brainer for 2015. Witcher 3, we've talked to death about this game. If you haven't heard about Witcher 3, you either don't like games or you've been living under a rock. So, Witcher 3 is amazing for reasons that I feel like we don't really have to go into right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's The Witcher 3. I don't know what else to say. It's great. Great story, great gameplay, great
Yeah.
music, very epic. They're making a TV show. It's probably going to be pretty good, hopefully. I mean, yeah, like everything about it is just awesome.
If you like open world, if you like badassery, if you like dark worlds, if you like good stories, if you like kind of like nerdy folklore stuff, you're going to like this game.
Yeah, yeah, and probably most of our listeners who are into gaming have already
Yeah,
played it.
exactly. All right, 2016. Wait, did you pick the same game for 2016 as well?
No, I didn't, but I think I just didn't play games during that year for some reason. I'm not sure. That was in Korea, so I don't know why exactly.
Well, I remember you
but
didn't have a PS4 that year, right?
no, I really didn't play like anything that year, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, so you
I've like
picked
nothing.
Your pick was Overcooked 2, I see.
I don't know. I just threw that up there. Yeah, I mean that was a really fun game we played. I think maybe that was like kind of like the year where we played a lot of multiplayer games. You know, like
Yeah.
we both really love Rocket League. I could have
Yeah.
put that on there too easily. You know, Rocket League is a really fun game. I think just, you know, when you don't have a lot of that, I mean, that's something as well. When you don't have like a AAA title to play, like playing a good multiplayer game with like a group of friends in like a local setting, it's always really fun. Like if it's
It is.
Overcooked or Rocket League or something like that, like that's really always great.
Yeah, I totally agree. And 2016 was kind of a disappointing year, in my opinion, as well. That was also the year I was really excited for No Man's Sky, and No Man's Sky just completely let me down. So I picked Uncharted 4. Now, I don't really know. This is a really good game. It's really the best way they could have ended Uncharted. But at the same time as I say that, it's basically just more Uncharted. So, I mean, like, yeah, it's great. If you like Uncharted, you're gonna love it. It caps the story really well. So I give them a big kudos because they didn't screw up the ending in terms of the story. They did a really great job ending the series and making it seem complete and keeping their fans happy. It's my second favorite Uncharted game after Uncharted 2. It's really good. If you like Uncharted, you'll like it. All right, on to 2017. This is my favorite year of the decade, I gotta say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just added another game to that because I think you can't really have that year without mentioning all three of those games. So
Yeah, and I guess I'm gonna mention the PlayStation side since I'm finally actually finishing this game now. And Persona 5, I've talked about this game a lot in past episodes, so I'll spare you most of the details. But Persona 5 is just greatness personified in a JRPG. It's all the stuff you love about old RPGs mixed with a lot of stuff that you didn't think you'd like about new RPGs, and it's just amazing. I mean, it's 100 hours long, so it's going to take you forever to play, but I love Persona 5.
yeah, I mean, I think I played like maybe like 15 hours of that game or something. But just the depth of the story, you know, it's not like a mindless quest. Like it actually has a lot
No.
of depth and story and just thought throughout the whole thing. It's really stylish. The music is really cool. Like the whole combat thing, like everything about it just feels refined and fun and cool. Like yeah, no, Persona 5 is an amazing game. If I had an unlimited amount of time, I would absolutely beat that game. It's just
Well,
yeah,
I'm
it's quite the
finally
slog.
in the last palace. I'm in the last palace, so there's one more little dungeon after this. So I'm guessing I have between like 10 and 20 hours left of the game.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about the Switch side of things. 'Cause that was the year this Nintendo Switch came out, which pretty much it makes 2017 awesome in the first place. But two bombshell games that are probably not going to surprise anyone. What are they?
Yeah, of course, Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey. I mean,
yeah, of course.
you know, our very first episode and pretty much the motivation behind this entire podcast was Breath of the Wild. Like we played that game and we wanted to share our experience with that game with, you know, an audience, and that's really the motivation for doing all of this. So yeah, obviously Breath of the Wild is a hugely important game, you know, for both of us personally, but also for the history of the podcast, I think, because it is our first episode. So
yeah. I mean, this was kind of
yeah.
like the months leading up to the podcast. We just talked about this game endlessly, and we're finally like, why don't we try a podcast episode and talk about this game? Because we're basically just wasting our time just putting this in, not wasting our time, but we're just putting this in Facebook Messenger and it's just disappearing into nothing. Why don't we like materialize this a little bit?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, yeah, it really cemented the idea that, you know, video games are something worth talking about with other people. And it's worth having podcasts to talk about your experiences of video games and your thoughts of video games. I mean, and I think that's really kind of what we're about. Like we really like to focus on video games as more than just kind of consumer items that you buy, but more about like the experiences and kind of what they represent, like the art and just the style and the feelings that they give you. And I think that's just really exemplified by Breath of the Wild, like.
I will say it's very hard to have this conversation with a list of like 20 games in 10 years and have very in-depth conversations. So it's just funny that we're saying that, like, oh, we have to have these in-depth conversations as we're like running through a list. But yeah, we absolutely love to do like deep dives on single games. So that
it's hard. It's hard to not deep dive when you talk about something like Breath of the Wild. That's for sure. And I mean, you can make a similar deep dive about Mario Odyssey. It's another classic and a great game. I can't believe it came out the same year.
I feel like it's kind of like I don't know why I have like this negative feeling about it, because it's like I really love Mario Odyssey and I almost think I like it more than Breath of the Wild in some ways, but I always feel like I kind of like shanked this game a little bit because it came out the same year as Persona 5 and Breath of the Wild. But Mario Odyssey is like, in my opinion, you know, the best 3D Mario, and just like basically a reinvention of the whole kind of like concept of what Mario is. You know, he no longer really has like his suits and stuff. He's taking over enemies' bodies. He's basically utilizing whatever he sees in his environment to get through the levels. And it's just such a beautiful, amazing experience that will just surprise you at every single turn. And I love the game enough. We both love the game enough to get to the 500 Power Moons and get to that like very, very final stage and beat it. So this is by no means a third place game at all.
No, it's a really incredible game. Yeah, I mean, I think if this game came out in 2016, or, you know, it would have been like Game of the Year.
Yeah, definitely. So 2017, best year of the decade, in my opinion. I think you feel the same way.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But 2018 was also good. I like 2018. I feel like you were not as big of a fan of it, but I really enjoyed 2018. I played a lot of really cool games. And we both agree with the best one is, I mean, but I also really loved like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. Was really hard for me not to pick here, but 2018 I had to give it to God of War. It's a series I've loved for so long, since the very first God of War game, and they brought the series back in the best way possible. This is another episode we've done a whole podcast on, so we probably shouldn't talk about it too much, but just as pretty much, it takes what The Last of Us does, or what The Last of Us did. It takes what the old God of Wars did, and it meshes it with all this Norse mythology and really great strategic combat, and it's just this beautiful experience.
Yeah, for sure. It is a really fantastic game. It's a refinement of a lot of things, and it all just comes together in this kind of like complete perfect package. I really hope that they make another game like basically like God of War 2 in that style. I really hope they do. It'd be so cool.
I think they will.
I guess we'll see. Yeah, I think they will. The game really hinted on it, but what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say, did you see the ending scene where Thor kind of appeared?
Yeah. No, it was definitely hinted that they would do another one.
Mm-hmm. And I gotta say, I think this is Santa Monica Studios' best work. I mean, they've done so many amazing games, including, I think, Journey. I think they worked on Journey as well, which is one of your other favorite games of the decade. Mm-hmm. But I think God of War, to me, it's just the pinnacle of what they've done.
Oh, absolutely. No, it is seriously like a nutty, awesome game. Like, on many different levels. It's really good. It's really great. And I think there's still a decent amount of content that I have not completed with that game. Like I just beat the main story. I think there's actually the side quests. Like did you do anything with the Valkyries or anything like that?
The Valkyries were really hard. They just kicked my ass so many times. So I think
Yeah.
I killed like two or three of them. There was an extra world where you could kind of do like an arena style thing. There was different
Mhm.
challenges and rounds you had to get through, and I did try that for quite a while until I got to a couple levels that were just like so insanely hard that I kind of just gave up. But there's a lot of extra content you can kind of play through.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, no, it has a lot there besides just the main game. So
hmm Yeah. So I mean, if you haven't played that game, go for it. I think that game is a good reason to be on the side of PS4 right now. Just absolutely one of the best exclusives of the decade. All right, and we're finally at this year. Now, I gotta say before we announce our favorite games, I found this year really disappointing. Have you felt the same way?
somewhat. I think especially compared to 2017 and 2018. I mean, this is probably a year that's much more like 2016. It's a little bit of a
Yeah,
lull year. Yeah.
and I was expecting the Switch to come into 2019 swinging, having like a lot of great games. And to be fair, they have had some really good games that I'm personally just not a big fan of. Like I don't like Luigi's Mansion that much, so it's not a game I'm really excited about. And Pokemon Sword and Shield are a game I'm kind of waiting on. I'm not like really rushing to play those, even though I think I eventually will try them.
Hmm.
The only game that I haven't played that's really high on my wish list is Astral Chain. I think Astral Chain looks really cool, and it's a game I hope to play when I can find some time eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I've been sort of busy, so I haven't played a lot of games. But I mean, some of the games this year so far are not too exciting for me. Like, I'm really not excited by Death Stranding. I-
See, I was hoping it would be really good, but yeah, it just looks like it's such a kind of boring game. If I there's the only word I can really think of, just kind of it
yeah,
seems like a very boring
and also
adventure.
just Kojima's response and how like he's just like insulting people who are critical of it, whatever. And
Yeah,
I think like game of the year was given to
Sekiro.
Sekiro, yeah, Sekiro. And I mean, I think Sekiro is an interesting game, but to me, it just feels very Dark Soulsy. I mean, I don't know. It's not necessarily my kind of game, really. Um, so I have recently been playing Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is a really cool game. I would not put it on like the highest like lists of the decade or anything like that, but just because I haven't played like super great games this year, I would kind of put it up there. I mean, it's a really kind of fun game. I think it's an actual single player game, Star Wars game, and it does lightsaber mechanics like pretty well. Although it really again feels like Dark Souls. It's like similar combat style, which isn't fine, but yeah, it's very like punishing. Like you really have to get your timings right and everything like that.
Yeah, it looks really cool and people really love it. And I keep hearing that like the platforming elements are kind of like an Uncharted kind of feel. It's like Uncharted meets Dark Souls. I think that's kind of what I've heard people
Yeah,
describe this game
yeah,
as.
yeah, yeah. That is a pretty good description. Um, I enjoy it. I thought it would be. I thought it would be more like the Jedi Knight series. But it's absolutely
hmm
not. You know, like the. Did you ever play any of those Jedi Knight games?
No, I'm
Like
not like I'm not a huge Star Wars video game fan. I really loved like Battlefront 2 way back in the day, but I don't
oh,
play a
okay.
lot of the extra games and the I don't play a lot of
Yeah,
Star Wars games.
yeah. Well, my favorite games from back in the day were the Jedi Knight series. So there was Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy, and they're both for the PC at the time, and they're both were just amazing games. Like really really fun, cool games. Like you didn't just have your lightsaber stuff. Like you had like blasters and a lot of other of the different aspects of the Star Wars universe. But in Jedi Fallen Order, it's just your lightsaber. That's the only thing you have, and you have very limited force powers. So you feel kind of like weak, and you can die really easily. And yeah, it's frustrating as hell. But did you ever play this Resident Evil remake, or do you have any interest in that?
You mean Resident Evil 2?
Resident Evil 2. Sorry, yeah, that's what I meant.
Well, as a kid, I didn't really. I played all the Resident Evils when I was younger, and I liked 2 a little bit, but I always gravitated towards 3, which they recently announced they're going to remake in 2020. So, no, I didn't. I played the demo for Resident Evil 2. It's really beautiful. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful games I've seen on the PS4. But I'm not hyper interested in it. When Resident Evil 3 comes out, that might be a different story because I have a lot more history with that game. But I ultimately find Resident Evil games to be fun, but really, really frustrating. I find the puzzles to be really challenging, and I feel like I can never beat the Resident Evil games without a guide. So I'm always a little bit ambivalent about playing them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm kind of in the same boat. It's not really my cup of tea. I mean, there's so many games and genres in general that have come out that, neither of us were really like super into. Games that I know people really, really love, like Fire Emblem Three Houses or whatever. Like I have a friend who's just absolutely obsessed with that.
See, I played that. I
series.
Beat that. I did like it.
Okay, you beat that?
I did it. Yeah, I did. I enjoyed it. I kind of found that the storyline was a bit burdening in that game. It sort of follows like a Persona 5 system where there's a calendar system and you have to build like social. You don't have to build social links per se, but you have to spend time with your characters and build your bonds with them and find out their own story. But I found it to be a little bit weaker than the way it was done in Persona 5. And I personally prefer something like Fire Emblem Awakening on the 3DS, where the emphasis was more on the combat than it was on the story. And to me, Fire Emblem Three Houses it was a good game, but it was too easy on normal mode. It was way too easy. And I found the storyline to be just a little bit overwhelming with the social system.
Huh. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've never really been into that style of game, so it's not really my thing. But yeah, I mean, of course, this list and these games that we've selected are just sort of like our own personal takes. I mean, there's so many games that have come out that we didn't even mention. Like we haven't.
Well, I haven't even said my 2019 pick yet.
Okay, well, what's your 2019 pick?
My 2019 pick should not come as any surprise to anyone that knows I'm a Zelda fan, and that's Zelda Link's Awakening remade for the Nintendo Switch. And Zelda Link's Awakening is my very first Zelda experience as a kid on the original Game Boy. It's the very first Zelda game I ever beat. It's the very first Zelda game I ever beat multiple times. And so it should come to no surprise that I absolutely love Link's Awakening remade on the Switch. I think it's a little bit too similar. Like, they really didn't change anything. It's the exact same game with just like better controls and better menu optimization. But I really just loved seeing this game brought to life again with all new graphics, a new soundtrack that was the same, but like they just remastered all the songs. They all sound better than the chip tunes or those little 8-bit tracks on the Game Boy. Mm-hmm. And it was just amazing to play this game again. I just realized, I'm like, this is definitely one of my favorite Zelda games. And just those quirky Mario levels where you're running through 2D levels with Link and stomping on Goombas, like that's all there again. And yeah, I don't know. I love this game. It was really amazing just to go back and replay it.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's definitely a game I want to play eventually. For me, it wasn't worth the price at release, but I think eventually I'm gonna want to play that game.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, when you play the normal version, it is the same, but there is like a hero mode or something I'd eventually like to try out with the game. And I thought that the $60 price tag was a little bit steep, since it basically is just like a verbatim like remix of the original. But I think at the end of the day, like I love the Zelda game so much that I knew this game was going to end up in my collection eventually. So I rushed out and I grabbed it when it first came out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is so many games are being remade these days. I always just feel a little bit weird when a remake is like a $60 title, but I think that's just the world we live in, so...
Well, Nintendo, it certainly is. They definitely aren't going to cut their prices on their games. They kind of go completely for quality. They say, hey, this is a quality title. You're going to pay for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it is a good game, and I've heard people speak very highly of it. But I mean, I guess we're gonna get 3 Final Fantasy VII games coming. So
is it 3? I thought it was 2, but okay, it's
is
now
it
3.
2? I don't know.
I have no idea, man. But I thought it was 2.
Yeah, but going forward, I think 2020 is going to be incredible.
It is, especially on the PS4 side of things right now.
Oh yeah, no, it's going to be crazy. Last of Us 2 and Final Fantasy VII remake. What the heck?
Yeah, not to mention Cyberpunk's right in between
Oh
those
yeah,
as well. Cyberpunk 2077's right
that's
in the
just.
middle.
It's just I think 2020 is going to be the PS4's 2017. To be perfectly honest, I really do.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be one of the best years. I think they're going to go out with a bang for sure. And there's still stuff that's, I mean, sure, especially in the Nintendo side of things, there's definitely stuff that hasn't been announced yet. There's a lot of probably surprises that Nintendo is kind of withholding right now.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of like on. I don't know. I'm not too excited with a lot of the Nintendo stuff at the moment. Like certainly whenever Metroid 4 hits, but that's not going to be for a long time.
Yeah, I think other than Animal Crossing, I don't think that there's a whole lot on the Nintendo side that's known right now. I think in their next, what do they call those? The Nintendo
Directs.
Nintendo. I think in the next Nintendo Direct, the next Nintendo Direct, there's going to be some bombshells.
Yeah, I hope so. But I really feel like 2020 is the year of Sony, like undoubtedly.
As of now, yeah, it's pretty crazy. All right, guys. Well, that's what we felt about nature and video games. We're going to give you a very quick little conversation because we're running out of time now about podcasting. So, the Pixel Meditations has been going on for about a year and a half, and we thought podcasting was a really awesome hobby slash kind of maybe way to learn some professional skills. We thought it'd be really cool to take it on, and we're both huge podcast fans. So, Toby, before we get into this a little bit, maybe you can tell the listeners a couple other podcasts that you really enjoy.
So I mean, I really run the gamut with the types of podcasts that I enjoy. For me personally, I really enjoy podcasts that kind of have long form conversations, so they really get me thinking a lot. I mean, I think originally the very first kind of podcast that I really got into was definitely Sam Harris's podcast. I mean, I'm not gonna like say like I stand behind every single thing Sam Harris has ever said, and he's my hero, and I love him. But I think he does a really good job with his guests, and he really makes for an entertaining, engaging podcast. So I think it's a format that we kind of at least look to as like a model. But I also really enjoy different podcasts. Like there's this really cool AI podcast, this like artificial intelligence podcast, and it's basically like this really interesting MIT kind of grad student slash PhD guy, and he just has like really cool guests. So I think just guest podcasts that have really interesting technical backgrounds are really cool. I really get into like history podcasts and news. So I really like politics. Like 538's podcasts is really good. Oh man.
Okay,
My phone is okay. Anyway, so what about you? What are your like top podcasts?
I guess I'll just give you a few that I'm listening to now. I mean, for a long time, I've been listening to The Art of Manliness. I know I talk about that podcast a fair bit. Art of Manliness is really great because his episodes are pretty consistent in length. They're all about 30 to 50 minutes. And every episode, he has on a specialist, mostly people who have written books, and they talk about everything under the sun. Everything from exercise to how to increase your memory to living your life more in nature. He just has guests from, every walk of life, and it's sort of aimed at self-help, like ways that you can use their skills or use what they've learned and to put it into your life. So I don't listen to every episode. There's some I delete if I really I'm not interested in the topic, but I love that. Another one I really like is Throughline, which is a history podcast. It's sort of a similar idea. They do it in 40 or 50 minutes. They run through different historical stories. Lately, they did like how the USA is very obsessed with conspiracy theories. They've done an episode on Puerto Rico that I really liked. They've done an episode on the Kurds that I really enjoyed. And so they link history to the present. And I like learning languages, so if any of you guys want to learn Spanish, Coffee Break Spanish is really awesome, really entertaining, and the host does a really good job of explaining everything very thoroughly. So those are 3 recommendations I would give you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's just so many of them out there. We both really, really enjoy Dan Carlin's history podcast.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, really good. And also, I mean, obviously, how can you not mention Joe Rogan? He's a really great podcast. I listen to maybe like, I don't know, 5% of his interviews because he's seriously prolific. It's crazy how many he does, but it's just like he really has spearheaded this like long format, interesting, engaging interview style. And I think he has some really cool stuff.
Yeah, and I think, you quote Sam Harris more. I think like Joe Rogan would be more on my side of things in terms of the way I'd like to see a podcast structured, just because Joe Rogan hits this really nice medium where he has these long form conversations about very, very complex topics, but they never become boring and they're very comedic. But Joe Rogan's also willing to invite guests on who have, interesting tales, or they're not necessarily like really high intellectuals, but they have different skill sets, or they've been a part of different walks of life that are very interesting for listeners. So I think it has more of a narrative aspect to it than Sam Harris, and I really appreciate that Joe Rogan can bridge so many cool ideas together while being entertaining.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Joe Rogan has an interesting way of bridging different kind of realms of kind of knowledge. Like, he's obviously, his background is, MMA and comedy. So, he's not really from, a university or whatever. That's not really his background. So he kind of represents, I guess you could say, like street wisdom in a really like interesting way. I think it appeals to a lot of people in that respect. Like he has a lot of, people from the MMA world or whatever, or other fellow comedians on there. And he kind of like brings that more like street wisdom into his podcast, but he also combines that with definitely like a wit and the ability to interact with like, the smartest people from any university or whatever, like on any academic topic. So he's definitely like, he's bridging like two worlds, but I think he does it really effectively, and it's really interesting.
Well, I think part of the reason he does it effectively is that he's willing to change his mind on issues. He's not someone who's there to convince you of something in most cases. He's willing to listen to his guest and learn.
Yeah, for sure. He doesn't come in there with a ton of preconceived notions that he's like unwilling to bend on. Maybe someone like Sam Harris is much more unwilling to learn and bend. Which is probably to the detriment of his format. Like, it's just less interesting because he's unwilling to really learn. He just has his notion in his head, and that's kind of what he goes with.
All right, well, this episode's running a bit long, and there's a lot more we wish we could say. There's definitely more stuff on podcasts, and we might have to do an episode just about podcasts in the future, because I think it'd be really cool. But that's a very, very brief glimpse of the 2010s from the side of podcasts, video games, and nature. We hope you enjoyed it, and see you guys in the next decade.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Pixel Meditations. We hope you enjoyed the episode as much as we did. If so, please support us and help spread the word about the Pixel Meditations so we can reach new listeners. You can do this by simply subscribing to our podcast, leaving us ratings and reviews on your favorite podcast apps, and by sharing our content. Gaming is as important to you as it is us, so please get in contact with us for any requests, comments, or suggestions. You can find us on Twitter at Pixel Meditation, email at thepixelmeditations@gmail.com, and Facebook at the Pixel Meditations page. Catch you next time for another conversation somewhere in the depths of the gaming universe.